Hello, Crystal Palace. Welcome to the Upper Norwood Library Hub's Library Live Lunch. This is a place to share positive and useful local information, a chance to find out about the community in a bit more depth and to keep us all connected during this time. So my guest today is Jay George, who is a local web designer and an admin of the Crystal Palace Freelancers Facebook group. So Jay, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a bit about your background and what got you interested in web design.
My background is a bit of a strange one, actually. I went to university to do a business degree, and I came out the other side and I landed a job in London. And I took a sales job to begin with, and the good thing about that is it made me realize what I really wanted to do, which I kind of realized halfway through my degree anyway. But I think sometimes when you're thrown into a job that you hate, it makes you realize how much of your job, how much of your life a job takes up. So I sort of, from that moment on, I hustled to develop my skills in web design. Mm-hmm.
So I take it that means you didn't like the sales was not for you.
I lasted about 7 months, which I was quite pleased I lasted that much, actually. Some valuable experience gained, but it wasn't for me, no.
Cool. And you found what you did want to do. So what kind of websites do you like making?
Yeah, sure. For me, I really enjoy making bespoke websites. So sites that are tightly wrapped around a business's brand and don't look like off-the-shelf templates, even though I will be talking about those later on. But that's what I really enjoy.
Okay, cool. Just before we carry on, I'm going to say hello to Dennis, Martin, Caroline, and Ruth, who have joined. If you guys have any questions, please do give us a shout in whichever social media platform you're in, and we'll try and answer them as we go along. Welcome also to anybody else who's watching whose name has not popped up, and same thing for you guys. Oh, we have Letitia, Marie, and Nick as well. Great. Thanks for joining us, guys. Cool. So Jay, tell us a bit about the ethos behind what you do. So you like ones that are connected very closely with a brand. Tell us a bit more about that.
I guess for me, it's a little bit strange. So I try to design something that almost doesn't look like a website, if you like, because I find there's so many white labeled standard website designs out there with the default sort of massive hero image and general navigation and things. So I tried to take a lot of influence from graphic design, for example, and especially nowadays where the technology on the web makes it really possible to do any kind of design that you can dream up. So if you look at the trends these days in website design, you'll notice there being a lot more graphical design influence now that we can achieve some of the things that are only possible within print. So magazine layouts and things, you'll see them coming more towards the web. So that stuff really, really excites me and pushes me further away from that sort of standard default template look. Yeah.
Cool. And it must take quite a bit of time to personalize a website to that degree and to find something that works from your point of view with what the client's trying to do and that they like as well. How do you go about doing that?
I've learned that there are different kinds of clients, and some will have a totally different budget to others. So I really try to gravitate to whatever budget they have and find a solution that works well for that. So, for example, any sort of custom design I end up doing, really, it costs in time. So I try to judge based on their budget what the best use of time would be. And sometimes I can't always necessarily get what I want and totally custom design something. But if the client leaves me to recommend a certain route or platform, then I know I can at least design something that looks a little less like a standard website and something a bit more special. So I judge it based on their budget.
Do you find that some people already have a quite clear idea about what they want as well, and some people don't?
In my experience, there are three kinds of clients. One on the one extreme where they have absolutely no idea what they want and they'll just let you get on with it. That's a great client to have. Then there's the other extreme, whereas they know exactly what they want and they almost just give it to you. Again, not the worst kind of client because at least it's clear. And then there's the ones in the middle that say something like, "Oh, I'll know it when I see it." They're the worst. So you want kind of either end of the spectrum, I would say, and that's some advice maybe I would give to clients as well. Is either you know what you want or you just leave it in my hands. Don't try and get involved in the cooking.
Yes, I sympathize with that one.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Just going to say hello to Merlin, Rosa, and Marilia, who've also joined us. It's great to have you guys watching. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask Jay as we go along, please do give us a shout on whatever social media platform you're on. We will try and answer them as we go. So Jay, actually something we were talking about the other day was you've been doing talks and screencasts and things, and I think part of that was about showing the client actually how you've got to where you're going. Is that right?
Yeah,
So
that's
tell
right.
us a bit more about that.
I actually got the idea from, I used to listen to a podcast a while back called Boag World, and it was a podcast made by a web design agency, but they would often talk about client relationships and trying to smooth out the processes of building a website and things. And one of the things they said was that I think in trying to create a website for a client, something that's very, very personal, you're basically designing their shop front. And so people can get very opinionated about that. But quite often clients will have this gut reaction when they see a design. Whereas if you can present it in a very controlled way and explain carefully your decisions and the reasons behind your decisions. So if the client can see that you've thought about something and arrive in a conclusion, then I think they're much more likely to accept whatever you've designed. And so it can really, for me, the idea of creating screencasts was to carefully present something to the client. And of course, the client can't interrupt when they're listening to a pre-recorded screencast. So for me, I started off that way in realizing that there were certain problems in getting sign off. And even though it takes a bit of time to do a screencast, it can quite often save a lot of time in getting the client on board with what you've done. So it's sort of manipulating, but more like getting them to empathize with the thought process that you've gone through, rather than just say, here's a design, I hope you like it, and you're inevitably going to get a no from that. So for me, it was more like a client management sort of thing to get into. But I think it's really interesting as well, because you can learn a lot about some of your presentation skills when you sit carefully and plan a screencast. I think it improves those skills as well. So it had lots of other unexpected benefits as well.
Does it also help clarify for you why you've done stuff the way you
Yeah,
have?
of course. Yeah, I mean, the one thing they say is if you ever write a blog post on a particular topic, it makes you think carefully about what you're saying. And if you can't easily write about something, then it means you don't understand it well enough yourself. And I think doing a screencast is the same kind of thing. It's forcing you to think carefully about the reasons behind things. Yeah, so it's a lot like writing in that way, which I think is a really good skill. Even if you're not a very good writer, I think it's a good skill to work on.
Yeah,
because if you're freelance, everyone's selling to someone at the end of the day, so you've got to try and work on those skills.
And just because I didn't actually know what a screencast was until I spoke to you the other day, so do you want to just explain that for anybody else who's watching who doesn't know?
Yeah, sure. So what we're doing right now is like a live interview, whereas a screencast would be me sharing my screen and recording that in my own time without an audience, and then going back over that and maybe re-editing it. So it's more in a controlled form of presentation. And there's lots of different software you can get to record your screen and things.
So you can literally explain what you've done while you're showing somebody it at the same time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do it for web design clients, but the reality is it could be useful for all sorts of things. And the more you do it, the faster you get at recording them. And I think at the end of the day, it does save time. It does save time in terms of dealing with the client relationship and trying to get them to understand your point of view.
Brilliant. Cool. Thanks. So moving on to what you're actually here to talk about today. which is very kind of you, in fact, but how small businesses can actually get started with a website on their own. So do you want to give us a demo on this?
Yeah, I was going to share my screen just to show you a few different things. So let me try and do that now.
Brilliant. And while you're just doing that, we've also been joined by Jack on Instagram. So thanks very much for joining us. And again, if you've got any questions for Jay, any of you who are watching, please do give us a shout in the chat as we go.
Okay. Great. Well, when Eleanor asked me what I wanted to talk about on this lunchtime session, I thought actually the most useful thing I could talk about for the potential audience for this is how to go about deciding where to get started with your own website for a small business, or maybe you're a freelancer as well. So I think the way to start really is to ask yourself a few different questions. I think the most important thing that will dictate where you go with trying to build your own website is to decide what kind of budget you have. And this is a really hard question to ask clients, because if I ever ask clients, they think I'm just trying to get their budget out of them to maximize whatever I can sell them. But it's not that. It's the kind of solution that a web designer would recommend to a client would change drastically depending on how much money they want to spend on things. So I think there are two like wide brackets for small businesses. I think if you're starting off, maybe you don't have a business yet, but you want to get a web presence, or maybe you're in your first or second year of trading and it's still a little touch and go, then I think you'll probably have a budget of under £2,000. You might even have a budget of under £1,000 if you're just starting out. Or conversely, if you've got an established business and you want to invest something into your website, you might have a budget of say between 2,000 up to maybe £10,000, and that you can see there's a huge spectrum there. But I think those two brackets are a good place to start, whether you're sub 2,000 or over 2,000. So I think once you've decided what kind of budget you have, you might want to think about, well, what could push that budget up and down? Say you do have the money available, what could push that sub or post £2,000? So I think there are two things that will influence your budget a lot. One is whether you want to potentially sell things online, whether you've got your own products and you want people to go through a checkout process, what's called e-commerce, you selling things on your website. So that's something that could push the budget up or down. And the second thing, really, what pushes it up and down is whether you want a bespoke design to fit around your brand tightly, or whether you're happy to go with a more templated solution and maybe tweak that. Maybe you want to change the colors and the fonts and things. I think those are the things that will push your budget up or down. So go on, Eleanor.
Oh, sorry. I just was going to ask why. I get why a bespoke element would push the budget up. Mm-hmm. Why would the e-commerce bit potentially make a difference?
I think it'll make a difference because you've got other things to consider, like the cost of photographing your products if you want to do that professionally. Also, on these various different platforms, which I'll show you, if you do add e-commerce, that will push maybe the monthly cost up. Or if you want to go down the bespoke route, so someone's designing this from scratch, then they'll need to deal with different payment gateways, and it's a lot more technical to make sure that those things run smoothly. Yeah, that really does make a difference, I would say.
Cool, thanks.
No worries. So I'm going to cover three different kinds of platforms, if you like, when you're considering starting a business. The first one to talk about is Squarespace, which you can see here. This has become popular in the last few years as a website builder. There's also one called Wix, which lots of people have heard about, which is fairly similar to Squarespace, but it's bigger in terms of the amount of templates available and the amount of complexity. I haven't actually used Wix myself, although I've heard lots about it and I understand it. Actually, Wix is something that I probably wouldn't have recommended a few years ago. It didn't look particularly nice, but in the last few years, they seem to have really tidied up their design culture, if you like. So Wix is something that you could possibly look at. And then there's the third one, which is WordPress. And WordPress I've mentioned here because I think this is most people's go-to when they're thinking about what to build a website, or most people have heard of this at least. So WordPress is similar to the other two, but it's broader. So you can actually get a developer to build a bespoke theme for this. The one thing I would say about WordPress, which is something to consider when designing a small scale website, is that the amount of themes they got available is like in the thousands, because basically any sort of developer or designer can upload a theme to this. So although you may think this is a good thing, in my opinion, this is actually a bad thing, because when you're looking at the different themes, you don't really understand what the quality of the theme might be, because anyone can do it. So in that respect, I would actually, and I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I would recommend that you start with Squarespace. The reason being is that the amount of templates they've got available is quite a small selection. And I think what that means is that you're going to pick a really high quality template, because all the templates on Squarespace are made by Squarespace themselves. So you know that it's going to be tight. And also they have a really good design culture behind them. So if you just pick their theme at a default level, then you're going to get something with really nice typography, really nice white space, all those kinds of things.
I guess that means it's really compatible, doesn't it? You know that all the templates are really compatible with the platform, if that's the right word.
Yes, yeah, and it's a really nice, because Squarespace is a modern platform. The editing experience is really nice, so I would definitely recommend starting with this if you're going to go down the lower budget side of things. The next thing I was going to talk about the pricing on Squarespace. So this is where the e-commerce side will potentially impact you. They have different pricing plans. The e-commerce is £30 a month, but the basic version is £10 a month. And I think this is actually a really good price for a small business, because the reality is, even if you get a site built bespokely, the reality is that you'll still have to pay for hosting for that site, even when the developers handed it off to you. And that might be, I don't know, that might be like £5 a month, but it could quite easily be £10 a month. So if you're going for the lower plan on Squarespace, you're not really going to be spending any more money on a monthly level than you would do normally anyway. So I think that's a really good price. But the next thing I was going to say was that in terms of the actual monthly running costs of things, I don't think that this is the real cost of building a website. I think the real cost is time, the time of gathering all your content together, thinking about it, or it might be that you're paying for someone else's time to do this for you. So although this sounds cheap, I think the time aspect will be your real cost.
I totally concur with that. Having just my major project during lockdown was actually getting my website redone, basically, and I absolutely concur. The time it took, even though I wasn't creating it myself, the time it took to get everything together was definitely the biggest outlay.
Yes. So I think that there are three things to think about when you're deciding whether you're going to build a website yourself. I think the first thing is time. How much time do you have? The second thing is how technical you are. How confident are you with computers? Are you the kind of person that is happy to tinker with a formula on a spreadsheet, or do you get intimidated by all that kinds of things? Because the reality is, even with a nice template base, you're going to have to tinker with things to get it just how you want it. And the third thing, I think, is how much of a visual eye or design eye you think you have. Because even with these templates, it can be quite easy to make them look horrible pretty fast. I think you should have an honest conversation with yourself. So, for example, maybe if you're in the design industry, you're an interior designer or an architect, then you may want to have a go at trying to make visual decisions yourself. But if you're unsure about any of those three things, so whether you have time, how technical you are, or whether you've got a design eye, at that point, I would try and get someone to help you, even if you go with the more budget side of things. And the last thing I was going to cover was, at what point is it a good idea to consider a bespoke, custom-built website rather than a templated version of things? So I think there are two reasons to go custom. One is if you have a very specific design in mind, or you have very specific functionality ideas in mind. So say, for example, I don't know, you're a real estate person, and maybe you wanted to list different listings with maybe like a custom little map on each different listings. If you have like very specific ideas like that, then a template might not cut it. I was going to quickly run through a couple of sites that I found where I think these sites are definitely the custom route to go. So this is a design agency in Hereford, nothing to do with me, but here is a good example where you can see they've got like a custom illustration of this logo mark on the right. And then in the footer, for example, they've got this lovely custom illustration as well. And you can see that there's more thought behind this rather than it being like a white label kind of site. Here's another example of a site. This guy is a web designer, and you can see that he's tried to make his site really fun, really custom. I think as soon as you go into the illustration side of things, where he's, you can see he's done stuff with his avatar, and he's got these funky things going on further down. You can see this is a very specific design direction, and using a template would be difficult to make this work. I've got two more examples. One is these are sites that I've built. So this is like a housing development agency, and we had this idea to have this magazine layout where you scroll down and the image on the right sort of stays in focus. So something like this, like a specific idea like this, would be where you would go into the more custom territory. And then I also helped this Matcha Burger Bar launch their business. They were like a Deliveroo kind of business, and you can see it's a very specific header design with the very custom fonts and things, and they've got their own menu of food and things. So these are some examples of where if someone came to me with this kind of idea or design, I would say, okay, well, it's time to maybe up your budget and step outside the template world. So I think that's about it for my main talk. I've got a few other things I could talk about, or we could wrap up. I don't mind.
We've got a couple of minutes if you do want to share anything else.
So the next thing I was going to talk about is maybe you've decided your budget, you've decided what kind of route you're going to go down. Where do you start in prepping yourself to get this website built? So I think the first thing I would do personally is to start writing content down. And you're going to have to do this regardless of whether you get like someone to do it for you, whether you go down the custom route. You need to write everything down about the business yourself, because you're the only person that really understands the business. No one else will. So you could get a copywriter to clean this up for you later on. That's a great idea. But the first thing is just to get it out. Don't worry about the structure of things, just get it onto the page. And then if you do work with a designer or a copywriter, they can then help you form some kind of structure around that. So get writing content, that's the difficult part. The other thing to consider, which makes a huge difference to how a website looks, is the kind of photography that you use. So you need to also decide on whether you have a budget for photography. If you don't sell products online, then you can probably get away with stock photography. And at this point, I would recommend trying to find really great stock photography rather than taking a few photos of, I don't know, something yourself. It will really make a big difference. Also, if you work with a designer and you do still want to go down the stock photography route, they can help you choose different photos that match a consistent theme, and that'll make a really big difference as well. So even if there's stock photographs, they could, perceivably look like real photos of your business if you choose ones that have a consistent lighting, consistent color palette and things like that. So those are
Interesting.
the two things to think about when you're starting to think about content.
Cool. Wow. That's really fascinating to think about it from the other side, actually. Thank
Mm,
you. Um, yeah, it's really interesting. Particularly so having just got mine done in the last few months. It's really, yeah, it's very interesting to think about it. I'm actually very glad that I didn't try and do it myself.
right. It is.
um,
It's a lot harder, even when you're just
yeah.
clicking around with the what you see is what you get kind of editor.
Mm,
It's a
mm.
lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's interesting, just the things that you're saying to think about. Actually, it's not necessarily intuitive.
Mm,
It wouldn't be intuitive for me doing it myself to think about those things. And actually, I was just thinking about in the end the reasons why I got somebody else to do mine. And I think it came down to three things, which was firstly time, which is what you said anyway,
hmm
which the amount of time it would have taken me to learn how to do something well enough to have a product I was proud of was
hmm
just, it would have cost me so much more in lost earning time than it cost me to
mm,
pay somebody who knows what they're doing. Um, and actually having somebody to help me work out what it was for, because I do so many different things that what was in my head was a mess of different things. And also accountability. So as you were saying, just about even getting everything written down, I kind of
mm.
needed somebody saying to me, I've made this file in a Google Drive for you, upload it when you're ready. Have you done it yet? I've got a bit of time this week, kind of thing, and just giving me that bit of a kick.
Yeah, and
So
I realized that when I'm designing my own site, that's the worst because there's no accountability there. So
yeah.
they say
Yeah.
cobbler's children's shoes. I think that's what they say.
Cobbler's
Yeah,
children go barefoot, isn't it?
yeah,
I
exactly.
think, yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
Yeah, cool. Well,
great.
we're nearly out of time, but thank you so much for that. It's really interesting. I think hopefully you guys watching, if you were thinking about setting up websites yourself, this has given you some useful things to think about. And if it's made you decide that you want to get someone else to do it for you, then just for example, Jay, how could people get in touch?
Yeah, sure. Even if you just need a bit of advice, then please get in touch. If you go onto my website, which is jgeorge.co.uk, and then click contact, there's my phone number there and my email address. So feel free to fire over some questions.
Cool. That's fab. Thank you so much for coming and having a chat with us. It's really interesting to hear about it from the other side, actually. So
I've
yeah,
tried to be
thank you very
honest.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, much appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks a
Um,
lot.
Pleasure. So just before we finish, you guys, I think we have a great live streaming program here. It does tend to change. There's a huge amount of content. If you haven't already had a look, please do. We have, particularly tonight, we have Covers Cafe with Rin from 8 o'clock. So just tune in and ask her for requests and she'll do them if she can. We've also got lots of regular things, singing, meditation, yoga. We have Kristin giving running tips on Thursday evenings. We have cross stitch with Alice, all sorts of things. So please do check it out. If you're interested in presenting something on the live stream program, also please give us a shout. If you're interested in being a guest on the library lunch to talk to us about what you do, what you've been doing during lockdown, please give us a shout at info@unlt.org. For either live, if you fancy live streaming something, or you're interested in being on the library lunch, that's the email address for it. Finally, as you may know, we've launched a new project called All Alone Together. This is funded by the Arts Council. We're really grateful to them. It's looking into the impact of COVID-19 on our local community. And we're doing this, starting with some research on that, and then the follow-up will be what can we do to help moving forward. So in terms of research, we have a survey on the website. It's 4 questions, I think, very quick. We'd be really grateful if you'd fill it in. It won't take more than 10 minutes at the most. The link should be in the feed on whatever social media platform you're on. And if when you fill that in, you would be up for being interviewed by me to have a longer chat about it, we would love to talk to you in person. There is a box you can tick to say you're happy to do that. And I would love to have a chat with you. So we're trying to reach as many people as possible. please do get in touch. Please spread the word. And yeah, we're hoping to have, among many other things, a library of voices available in the Library Hub, where you can hear people describing in their own words, in their own voices, how they have coped with the situation, what's happened, what they found, little details they've noticed. It's been really fascinating so far, actually chatting to people. So I would love to share that. Yeah, so get in touch, give us a shout. And in the meantime, have a lovely weekend. Jay, thanks so much for a really interesting chat. And we'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Thanks. Bye.